The wildfires in LA are expected to get worse. A new warning has been issued that with the Santa Ana winds picking back up, the fires could spread. The death toll is at 24, hundreds of thousands evacuated, 12,000 plus buildings destroyed, and a new fire, the auto fire, has been ignited, burning 55 acres. Now, there's conflicting reports as to whether or not that's been contained, but as the winds pick up, there's a fear. New fires, more fire. It's going to spread. It's going to get worse. Now, as we're trying to deal with this to the best of our abilities, politics, it's going to play a role. And while Donald Trump and many conservatives have criticized, and I believe rightly so, DEI policies, which have made the problem worse, liberals are coming out and attacking Donald Trump. Notably, Jimmy Kimmel, who on his show broke down, nearly crying, watching the fires rampage not too far from his studio. And you know what? I do feel for him. I mean, it's got to be scary. Those fires have destroyed the homes of people you love, people I love. And so I can empathize. But Jimmy Kimmel goes on to lie about what's really going on, lie about Donald Trump's position, and then refer to those of us who've supported the president and his administration as a gaggle of scumbags. Now, that's a step too far for me. You want to play those games, Jimmy? We'll play those games. Let's break down the real cause of this fire. Let's break down how your policies have caused this. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to have to go off on this rant, explaining to you exactly why these DEI policies make me so angry. And I'll break it down for you. I know many people struggle to define wokeness and explain this, but we will. We'll get started, of course, by listening to what Jimmy Kimmel had to say. But before we get started, my friends, head over to castbrew.com. Pick up some Cast Brew coffee. We got Focus with Mr. Bocus. It's our new espresso blend. And, of course, everybody loves Ian's Graphene Dream. It's a great coffee. We sponsor ourselves. And, of course, you can go to timcast.com, click Join Us, become a member to support the work we do here. If you like the reports on this channel, if you like Timcast IRL and the work we do, we rely on members like you to make this all possible. So, again, timcast.com. Become a member, support our work. But now, let's get back to the news. Mediaite reports Jimmy Kimmel breaks down over fires, bitterly condemns Trump and his gaggle of scumbags, saying firefighters aren't white enough. Okay, the only issue is that's never what Trump said. No one has any criticism of the firefighters for being not white. The issue is the LA Fire Department complained about having too many white people, held people back, and now there is a shortage of firefighters. But hold on, let me actually go through the story and then show you what Jimmy Kimmel said. Mediaite reports Jimmy Kimmel, in his first show since the wildfires broke out in the LA area, delivered an emotional condemnation of President-elect Donald Trump and his allies. In a solemn monologue on Monday, the ABC late-night host recounted what he called a very scary, very stressful, very strange week in LA. He tossed a footage that showed just how close his studio was to one of those fires.
As you know, it has been a very scary, very stressful, very strange week here in L.A., where we work, where we live, where our kids go to school. We are back in our studio, which we had to evacuate on Wednesday. That's our building right there, the El Capitan. That is how close this fire was to our theater here. Many of us had to leave our homes in a hurry. Some of our coworkers lost their homes. That's Hollywood. It's been terrible. It's been a terrible. Everyone who lives in the city knows someone, most of us, multiple people, families, friends, colleagues, neighbors whose houses burned down. And the truth is we don't even know if it's over. We had 100-mile-per-hour winds fueling this nightmare. As of tonight, the winds are back. And I think I speak for all of us when I say it has been a sickening, shocking, awful experience, but has also been, in a lot of ways, a beautiful experience because once again, we see our fellow men and women coming together to support each other. People who lost their own homes were out volunteering in parking lots, helping others who lost theirs. And tonight, I don't want to get into all the vile and irresponsible and stupid things our alleged future president and his gaggle of scumbags chose to say during our darkest and most terrifying hour. The fact that they chose to attack our firefighters, who apparently aren't white enough to be out there risking their lives on our behalf, is It's disgusting, but it's not surprising. Instead, I want to focus on thanking those men and women because that's all we should be doing right now. And we should never...
You know, it's a paranoid, delusional reality. The audience screaming and cheering for something that didn't happen. Donald Trump did not attack firefighters for not being white enough. Trump supporters, conservative personalities, moderates, whatever. Me? We never attacked firefighters for not being white enough. We attacked the ideology that has placed race and gender identity over the ability to fight fires or to properly staff the fire department. I want to start by showing you this article from Sky News. LA Fire Department's $487,000 per year diversity chief sparks fury for defending DEI by blaming victim. Quote, he got himself in the wrong place. Many of you may have seen this video because it's gone massively viral, but I'm going to start this off by explaining to you the problems of DEI, and this one really makes me angry. Now, I know Jimmy Kimmel lying about all of this is irksome as well, but this one really, really pisses me off.
You want to see somebody that responds to your house, your emergency, whether it's a medical call or a fire call, that looks like you. It gives that person a little bit more ease, knowing that somebody might understand their situation better. Is she strong enough to do this? Or you couldn't carry my husband out of a fire, which my response is, he got himself in the wrong place if I have to carry him out of a fire.
That's right, ladies and gentlemen. He got himself in the wrong place if I have to carry him out of a fire. Well, I'll just start by saying, yeah, sometimes people do get themselves in the wrong place and they do need someone to carry them out of the fire. That's the job. But the reality is right now with these wildfires, that's not what's happening. The 24 dead did not get themselves in the wrong place when they were trapped by a rapidly spreading wildfire. But now let me explain to you why this one makes me so angry. It's a story from NBC News. Former child star Rory Sykes dies in California wildfires as mom tried to save him. Sykes, 32, was born blind and had cerebral palsy and difficulty walking. NBC News reports, former Australian child star Rory Sykes, who was born blind and had cerebral palsy, died Wednesday in the California wildfires after his mother said she was unable to save him from their home. Shelley Sykes told Australian outlet 10 News First that she has a broken arm and could not lift or move her son. He said, "Mom, leave me." And no mom could leave their kid, she said, crying. Shelley Sykes said she drove to the local fire department for help, but they told her they did not have any water. She said when the fire department brought her back, Rory's cottage was burnt to the ground. According to 10 News First, firefighters told the mother that her son died from carbon monoxide poisoning in the wildfire. His death has not been officially included in the wildfire death toll, the station reported. So when the criticism is diversity, equity, and inclusion, it is this. Now, I don't blame the LAFD for Rory Sykes' death. The reason I am outraged is because the gall of this individual, this $487,000 a year diversity chief, for them to say, well, he got himself in the wrong place. There is an effort to hire people based on ideology instead of ability. And it's one component of why there is not enough firefighters, why the reservoirs were not filled. And despite the fact that there was a fire only several months ago and a warning a week ago, they did not plan to mitigate this disaster. So Jimmy Kimmel, cry. I get it. It's sad. But to insult Trump and everyone else around him as a gaggle of scumbags is pure ignorance, or you're intentionally misleading your audience. Here's a story from January 10th, 2025. Yes, LA Fire Department is understaffed. Would more money save us? Even with millions more, LAFD would struggle to contain fires under such extreme conditions. Perhaps. Maybe the fire is just too intense. But I do think it's fair to say, if you had a full reservoir, there would be water in the hydrants that don't have any. So let's not predict whether or not it would solve all of the problems, but let's point out how it was made worse by this crackpot ideology. In November of 2015, the LA Times reported, why the LAFD is still largely white and male despite diversity efforts. Harvard Business Review published this story in 2018, making U.S. fire departments more diverse and inclusive. And to exemplify the problem, not that it is about the firefighters not being white enough, but that there aren't enough firefighters and you won't hire white ones. From Outkick.com, Adam Carolla says he was rejected from LA Fire Department because of his race.
Geez, I want to talk about my white privilege so badly. I graduated North Hollywood High with a 1.7 GPA. I could not find a job. I walked to a fire station in North Hollywood. I was 19. I was living in the garage of my family home. My mom was on welfare and food stamps, and I said, can I get a job as a fireman? And they said, no, because you're not black, Hispanic, or a woman. We'll see in about 7 years. And I went to a construction site and dug ditches and picked up garbage for the next 7 years. I got a letter in the mail sent to my father's house saying, your time has come to do the written exam for the LA Fire Department. I took it, and I was standing in line, and I had a young woman of color standing behind me in line, and I said, just out of curiosity, when did you sign up to become a fireman? Because I did it, or a person, 7 years ago, and she said, Wednesday. That is an example of my white privilege.
This story is not uncommon. I've heard this story since I was a kid. My dad was a firefighter in Chicago, and as the story goes, if you're a white man, good luck. Now, in other cities, if they don't have a shortage of firefighters, there's a whole other can of worms to open on the politics of affirmative action and these policies. But we're talking about California. We're talking about the LA area, which is understaffed. And if you're understaffed, why would you have these policies? And this is Jimmy Kimmel's misconstrued criticism. Trump supporters, conservatives, moderates, people like me, we are not saying we don't like firefighters who aren't white. We're saying hire the people if you need them, and don't hire based on ideology, gender, orientation. Hire on whether or not the individual can do the job. Now, Time magazine has a more direct response saying the LA fires have nothing to do with DEI. They go on to criticize many of the claims, writing, Elon Musk, conservative journalists and commentators, and numerous others on social media are blaming the LA fires on diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, despite providing no evidence to verify their claims. Well, it's a good thing, for those of you watching, that I actually already presented the evidence before reading this article, so you know they're full of it. But sure, let's read more. They say, during a time at which fire suppression and disaster recovery ought to be the highest priorities, DEI attackers are recklessly seizing this opportunity to advance an agenda that ultimately aims to further divide Americans. I live in Los Angeles. We don't need more disinformation about DEI, especially right now. Let me just pause real quick to then say, perhaps you should stop engaging in it. But anyway, I digress. While the article does accurately describe how the Santa Ana winds and dry grounds are principally responsible, they don't add the failure to mitigate the fires, such as forest floor management, filling reservoirs, and hiring enough staff. They didn't factor in how that actually is making the problem worse. They go on to mention that Karen Bass has been accused of cutting the fire department's budget by 17%. They call it an inaccurate claim. Sure, but here's the real issue. Fact checkers like to play a game, and you know what that game is? They misconstrue the argument made against them so they can claim it to be false. The example I like to give is, let's say Donald Trump did a backflip on just flat ground. Wow, everybody was so impressed. And all the Trump supporters start sharing around this story that Donald Trump pulled off somehow at 80 years old a perfect backflip. All of a sudden, you'll see a fact check from one of these corporate news outlets that say, did Donald Trump do a backflip, ... on Saturday morning? False. They'll then write 300 words where you get this long tirade breaking it down. And at the very bottom, it'll say, well, Donald Trump did do a backflip. He didn't do it on Saturday. He did it on Monday. You see, that's the game they play. By adding or changing the context, they can call the whole thing false. When in reality, the fire department's budget was cut. Don't take my word for it. How about 9news.com NBC? Yes, LA cut $17.6 million from the fire department's budget. The LA Fire Department's budget was cut by nearly $17.6 million this fiscal year. That's a roughly 2% decrease from the previous year. But Time Magazine says 17%. Hey, I thought the issue was 17 million, not 17%. They then go on to say that actually the budget was increased. Okay, well, at this point, I can only tell you this. If you've got two conflicting news reports, how do you even determine which is true? Now, largely, I've seen across the board that there was a budget cut of $17.6 million. And when Time Magazine says 17% instead of 17 million, it sounds to me like they're falsely conveying information so they can debunk a claim nobody made. Now, I don't need to go and rehash what I already showed you, and that just touches on the surface of why Jimmy Kimmel is wrong and misconstruing our ideas. The truth is, many fire departments across the country are trying to introduce DEI policies, and this means they care more about ideology than meritocracy. That is to say, they would rather hire a black lesbian woman than a man who is capable because they're trying to find some kind of ideological goal in having, as the video said, people who look like you. And I just want to add also as an aside, the majority of the country is white. So the majority of your staff would be white by your own claims, but they're not doing that anyway. Now we have this story from USA Today, which just shows how insane the whole thing has really been. Updated yesterday on the 13th. LAPD hasn't linked LA fires to MAGA. Cause of blaze unknown. Fact check. Wait, what? What are they fact checking? That's right. On Threads of all places, Zuckerberg's Twitter counter, X counter, people were posting claims that the LA authorities had linked the wildfires to 3 supporters of Donald Trump. Quote, apparently, LAPD are looking for 3 persons of interest, all tied to a MAGA website, who were spotted at the source of all 3 major LA fires. This might have been the opening salvo in Trump's war against any state he considers an enemy within. The post was shared more than 200 times in 4 days. Dare I say, my friends, Threads is a dangerous source of misinformation. Watch out! Okay, in all seriousness, X, Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, like literally any platform is going to have people making these claims. But I do think it's particularly funny that they want to insult Trump and his gaggle of scumbags for accurately criticizing the policies of California. Meanwhile, their supporters are claiming it was Trump supporters who started the fires. The reality is, when you take a look at the news reporting, it's largely believed the LA fires likely began as a reignition of New Year's fire that LAFD ignored once it went cold. Post-Millennial reports, a new theory on what started the California wildfires has emerged as authorities have gathered evidence and are coming closer to seeing what started the largest of these fires. With that, the Washington Post reports the source of the fire could have been the remnants of a fire first responders put out about a week beforehand, but did not track afterwards. According to the Washington Post, analysis of photos, videos, satellite imagery, and radio communications, as well as interviews with witnesses, offers new evidence that the Palisades fire started in the area where firefighters had spent hours using helicopters to knock down a blaze 6 days earlier. They're going to say that reignitions are commonplace in states such as California that get frequent wildfires, and officials frequently warn that areas burned by wildfires that are seemingly extinguished can flare up even weeks afterwards if fire smolders underground or inside wood. Despite that, an LAFD spokesman told the outlet that it is not the department's practice to maintain patrols on recently extinguished fires. So for all the liberals that are claiming climate change, the reality is it's people. According to PJ Media, they say 95% of California's wildfires are started by people, not global warming. They present this amazing list. At breakneck speed, the mainstream media hopped aboard the global warming bandwagon. And here's just a few of the headlines. You've got Time Magazine, the New York Times, ABC News, LA Times, New York Times, Bloomberg, Sacramento Bee, the Associated Press, The Guardian, and the Washington Post. And they're going to say the irony is that the Democratic Party has long claimed to be a voice of science. Unlike those unenlightened, knuckle-dragging Republicans, the liberals are the ones who fearlessly follow the science, bravely going wherever it leads. Following the science, they point out, An overwhelming 95% of California's wildfires are man-made. It is not true that half the fires are started by Mother Nature or acts of God. And it's not kind of sort of true either. 95% is an absolute landslide. John Abatzoglu, a climatology professor from the University of California, has studied 30 years of wildfires in LA County. After examining the data, he was unequivocal. Quote, more than 95 of these California fires are human-ignited fires. And according to Open the Books, since 2019, over 5,200 homeless encampment cases were reported in the heart of Los Angeles. The downtown features art museums, hip restaurants, a mix of modern, high-rise buildings and traditional landmarks. And in May of 2024, NBC Los Angeles reported, up in flames, rising number of homeless fires threatens LA neighborhoods. In their brief breakdown, they say, there were 13,909 homeless fires in LA in 2023, almost double the number from 2020. Some of these fires are apparently caused by homeless people tapping into city electrical wires under the sidewalk. City officials confirmed that the wires can cause explosions if they're tampered with. So I think it is clear. The problems of wildfires are natural. Wildfires do happen. And it looks like this fire was started by people. It looks like the problem of homelessness has exacerbated the problems of fires. And certainly, dry ground, brush, lack of humidity, all of these things can make the problem worse. It is still human beings. And heck, if you want to go the climate change route, it's still human beings, which means this is a policy failure of California. So please, Jimmy, you don't need to cause a gaggle of scumbags because you are not smart enough to do a Google search. But hey, I made this video just for you. Please watch it with all due respect. You're a large personality. I want you to do better. I want you to know better. Let's go. Right now, Republicans are eyeing conditions on California wildfire aid after Trump criticism, says Reuters. And you know what? I think that's fair. Considering everything I just showed you, and that's only the tip of the iceberg, shouldn't it be that Republicans say, if you want aid, California, you have to fix these problems? Why? Well, if we give California $5 billion to fix this, but they don't deal with the underlying cause, it happens again. And are we going to be, the rest of the country, covering this bill every time a homeless person starts a fire or an arsonist or an illegal immigrant, whatever? Yeah, I don't think that makes sense. My friends, it's really hard to escape this stuff because even with all the Jimmy Kimmel nonsense, you've got this. Joy Reid claims billionaire right wants apartheid state in post-wildfire California. Reid said venture capitalists are preying on the Golden State amid the LA wildfires. And that's the world that they live in. It's always going to be everyone else's fault. It's always going to be some conspiracy. The venture capitalists are coming to steal your land. Now, I know some of these conspiracies exist on the right too, but hey, when we make criticisms about your policies, it's substantially more reasonable than you claiming some nebulous climate change did it. But that's the reality of their argument. The liberal position, despite the fact that they're understaffed, despite the fact their reservoirs are drained, despite the fact they have a homeless problem they won't solve, and that homeless are starting fires, despite all of these things, they say it's everyone else's fault for burning carbon and causing climate change. And we're going to solve this by taxing Texas? Never made sense. Not to mention, China and India are the biggest polluters, and they don't seem to ever fall into the radar of the climate activists. Now, by all means, we can have a conversation about the environment, climate change, and all of that, but that's neither here nor there. Right now, what we're talking about is how humans started a fire, most likely, and humans were not prepared to deal with that fire. That's policy. That's social order. And that is everyone's fault. Now, look, many of you will say, Tim, it's not fair. You can't blame Republicans for this, but I'll tell you this way. The way I grew up was that everything was my fault. I know a lot of you are saying, chill out, Tim. No, but I mean it. As the story goes, I like to tell, I was late to school one day because a train was in my way. I got a tardy. I got detention. And I said, it's not my fault, Dad. The train was there. And my dad said, you know the trains go through there. You know the train track is there. Your responsibility is to accommodate for these things. And he was right. So what I mean to say is, we as a nation should take responsibility for the failures of California. And that means Donald Trump needs to go in, the Republicans need to go in and say, we will help you, but you have to abide by changes. We know California's mismanaging this. Donald Trump knew and warned them. And while they're largely to blame for not adhering to it, what can we say that we warned them over and over again and then nothing was ever done? The New York Times published this article, September 10th, 2024. 3 wildfires have burned more than 100,000 acres in SoCal. The authorities have arrested a man suspected of starting the line fire. My friends, the point is, I know we do largely what we can, but we need to take responsibility ourselves, even though they're supposed to be in charge in California. I'm just saying, it's time to step up and assert some responsibility and tell California you will abide by our rules if you want this relief. In the meantime, Jimmy, please refrain from insulting people who are smarter than you, because we were right the whole time. Thanks for watching the video, my friends. Smash the like button, share the show, become a member at timcast.com. New videos every day, 4 p.m. Check it out. We'll see you all tonight at Timcast IRL, 8 p.m. Once again, thanks for hanging out.